good news is that I don't have to go on telling that global warming is real.
The motor vehicles running on fossil fuels are emitting less carbon than the EVs which we are propagating now. What do you think?
Doing mass level food products sustainably with the right ingredients is something that can be delivered.
So where do we start from? In fact, this morning when I was going to drop my 7-year-old daughter to school, and I asked her rather if you know about this topic, sustainability. She said, yeah, I know a bit. And she said, why do you ask? I said, I'm meeting two friends of mine, and we are going to discuss about this. And do you have any questions? She said, yes, ask them 2 questions. Why sustainability, and why this is so important, and what you guys are doing about it. Okay, that made me think that, a second grader or third grader has so much concern about this subject and what we are doing. So to start with, Varun, this topic itself, is there so much hype or there is a pressing need for this, and how do you define this of sustainability?
Sure. So I think, firstly, going back to what you said about your daughter, it's amazing how aware they are. My daughter refuses for us to buy any crackers, and she's been doing that since she was 2 years old because she heard somewhere that a chutney. So, and I think that's great, because I think it also talks about the education system and the overall kind of conversations that are happening. Coming to your question, Santosh, which is, to me, sustainability is pretty simply put, is about doing the right thing. If you look back historically, we've had the privilege of having a culture of thousands of years. You look at our architecture, it was always sustainable. You had buildings in desert areas, in arid areas, where you did not feel the heat because of the way the architecture, the buildings constructed in a highly sustainable manner, which ensured that you took the natural elements and you used them in a way without harming the environment. So the other aspect of sustainability, in my personal view, Satoshis, is about having longevity. If we can leave our planet at least the same, if not better, for future generations, that to me is being sustainable. And that is at least the ethos that I try to function with. Clearly, Pawan does a lot more great stuff, as I don't take the stairs, as which probably team is talking about. I'm very guilty about splurging bit on clothes as well. But I think on a very serious note, I think that's the kind of mindset, the one that Pawan is talking about. It's just about being aware and avoiding wasteful expenditure. For example, today I think we all love the fact of having these conveniences of e-commerce and quick commerce. But just look at the impact on the environment from a fuel point of view, from an energy point of view, from a packaging point of view, right? It's tremendous. And let me put my hand up first and say that I'm as guilty about that. So what can we do in our daily lives? So to me, sustainability is not something that corporates or the government or somebody else needs to do. I think each one of us in our own way needs to start, and is to start now. The second part of your question was, is it real, or is it just a lot of, brouhaha? To me, the fact of unseasonal rains, extreme temperatures, right? Be it all either side, too hot, too cold. You look at the rains that are pounding the northern parts of our country as we speak, which is completely unprecedented. The number of cloudbursts that are happening. This is clear evidence that definitely this is not a myth. It's something which has been there, and I think as a result of the negligence, I will say our collective negligence over the last 7 decades is where we are. And like Pawan very rightly mentioned, it's going to take the next couple of decades to get this right. At an overall level, India's minimum target is 2070. one may think of that as being 45 years hits, but that does not exist. So I strongly believe that the sense of urgency that needs to get is huge because of some of the data I got just spoken.
Pawan, we really hearing about rain fury in Dehradun. A couple of weeks ago, it was Jammu and Kashmir. Earlier, Gurgaon, Bangalore, Mumbai, and what we saw in LA last year. Almost entire LA was, and even Spain, the entire city was on fire. Amount of damage, the life were lost. What's your take on this?
So Santosh, I mean, good news is that I don't have to go on telling that global warming is real, because people can see the impact already. As a consumer, I think for a very long time, a lot of people never believed in it. I think still people don't believe in it, which is fine. But the impact is happening and it is real. People who are in the food supply chain, people who are buying from farms, and all of us are consumers of that. All the restaurants finally have to buy from farms, and all the supply chain people who manage those produce, get it to the restaurants. If you go and ask them, their biggest pain point is that they cannot predict the weather anymore. There used to be a time that summers to winters was a gradual process, and now it can happen suddenly. Now what it does, it destroys a lot of crop and hence creates issues for supply chain. This is real. All the natural disasters that you just mentioned are absolutely real, right? Flash floods, cloud bursts are going to be more norms than what used to be an exception, and we'll have to live with that, because I think there is some part of climate which we have destroyed, which probably we cannot bring back. Right? So all I can say is that it's not all lost, right? So there is still a lot of optimism, a lot of things which we can do and we should do about it. I will also recommend, I keep recommending people some of the books to read, not just listen to what I have to say. There is a very wonderful book written by my friend called Rajan Mehta, and this book is called Backstage Climate. This book very scientifically explains the problem of climate and the process of industrialization, the processes of energy generation, transportation, etc., which has been creating a lot more carbon emissions, has created problems for us, and this is creating a unnatural, untimely increase in temperature, and very fast. So the condition that we are expected to get into in the next, let's say 40-50 years, if nothing is changed, would be a situation which Earth was about 15 billion years back, which was a time when the water levels were way too high for general life to exist. So it's a very serious issue, right? It's not something we can brush aside. Good news is that a lot of policymakers, almost all the governments, including India, are seriously thinking about it, working on it. The corporates are getting pushed. And the most wonderful part is, like your daughter, I think the next generation is very, very aware. I'm very happy, optimistic, and proud of that. Recently at one of these chats with Gen Z founders, they used a term and they said thrifted is flex. I was so happy to hear that. For one reason, I could understand it. And second is that if people are buying old shoes and old clothes and showing them off, I think there is a trend coming about reusing stuff, and which is really good to see. So we see it as a problem, but we also see it as a solvable problem. So hence we see opportunities, and that's why we want to invest in it and want to encourage it.
And you mentioned you worked with FMCG, right? So FMCG of 2015 or before that, and FMCG of today, what was the practice then and what is it today?
That's a great question, Santosh. In fact, I think, it's probably also touches a bit on what Pawan was saying. if you look at organic products, right? So let's say within FMCG, there are food and there are not foods. Within food products, organic produce, etc. Now there are regulations which certify organic products. It was, I forget what it's called, NAPOP or something that sort, 2022. So you now have organic products, and where people are willing to pay a slight premium. Right? I think the critical part is the authenticity of the ratification of being organic and the price, how much the consumer may have to pay. I think from a non-food point of view, and that I think is probably even more urgent if you ask me, Santosh, because this is the entire supply chain, right from product. For example, if you look at a shampoo or a soap, you use parabens, you use sodium lauryl ethylene sulfate, which stay in mud for years, use plastics. The biggest challenge today that the entire world is faced with from a health point of view is microplastics. It's there in each one of us, it's there in our water bodies, etc. Where does that come from? It comes, unfortunately, from FMCG primarily, right? I'm sure there are other products as well. So I think it is all, I could say, drive towards making FMCG products more affordable, as you drive them down the population pyramid. I think there has unfortunately been that trade-off of using products which can be mass produced at lower costs but have a huge, long-lasting adverse impact on our environment. So I think there's a change in that understanding or awareness, Santosh. Has that really resulted into action on ground? I think it's too little too less. That's my honest view.
Before pointing fingers at the organizations, at the government, I think it's us, who are responsible, and the buck stop at us. Now, why these companies are not changing the culture of using plastic versus using the natural resources or those sustainable products? Is it cost? Because the plastic, what I either say, is much cheaper and easily available, or is there a mindset?
So Santosh, we are talking about capitalism here. Capitalism is based on consumption. So everything has to be produced more faster, so more and more people can consume, and there are enough stories of how the shelf life of products is reduced so that the consumption can increase. So I think the sole purpose, which when we were growing up, the sole purpose of an organization was to increase shareholder value. And that has been the reason of capitalism to focus only on one thing, which is the bottom line. And the bottom line was always profits, not about the impact that the corporation or the organization is bringing to the society. I don't think that is changing. Right. So that is still the same. We are still making money in stock markets, and that's what we believe in. And as I said, there is nothing wrong with that. We have come to a point that asking, or not just come to a point, I think at any given point of time, asking consumers to go down on their lifestyle is not going to work. It would be very easy if, the world reduces the consumption by half, right? Everything will be absolutely fine. But that's not going to happen, right? We are a species which desires new fashion, new watches, new shoes. We want a bigger car. We want a bigger house. We want to travel to all kinds of destinations where we should not be going with our motors and stuff. So that's not going to change. Now, coming to the companies, the topic that you talked about, plastic. See, plastic is a wonder material. I think that's been a humongous achievement of humanity, of human beings, to be able to produce a material like that in the last century, which can replace steel, and it can replace glass, and it can replace paper, God knows how many other materials, and function in different forms, shapes. and other requirements technically. So getting away from plastic is not going to be easy. I am of the opinion that we don't have to get away from plastic, right? If there is no plastic, there will be no hygiene in hospitals, right? There will be no food security. So plastic is needed. I think what is more important is to recycle it. Another thing is that plastic is not going to be there forever. The oil deposits are depleting. Very soon, maybe in a few decades of time, we may not have petroleum products to produce new plastic. So the whole essence right now is to reuse the plastic, right? Either upcycle it or recycle it, put it to some other use, and stop using virgin plastic. And that is something which is going to come either from policy or from consumer demand. I think corporates are not going to change that because they are living quarter by quarter, right? They are not living 30 years hence what will happen to the world. Okay? That's not how corporates think, because their quarterly reports is what creates the stock market prices. So I think, and good news is that there is work going on. So let's just talk about India here. There is a lot of pressure, not just pressure, actually penalties now for almost all the companies which use plastic bottles, beverage companies at least, to use recycled plastic only. There are steps which have been taken for that. In India, about 60 or odd percent of plastic bottles are recycled today, right? So it was a 40% number a couple of years back. So it is improving. The problem is with the multi-layer packaging which we find in chips, etc. And India is a country which uses shampoo sachets and various other things which are single-use small packets, and that recycling is a problem. We are evaluating companies which are building technologies for that, and that's how it will change. I don't think companies are going to change on their own. Coca-Cola is not going to change on their own. Didn't want to name any company, but there are many such companies like that, right? Indian as well as foreign. Nobody's going to change because of sustainability. Consumers are not going to change just because for sustainability, because convenience matters. I think what is very important is to give an alternative. Today we don't have an alternate. Let's say we talk about restaurant food, right? We order food delivery. There is no material still which can hold Indian curries in food delivery, so we need plastic for that. There is a company which has made plastic inner lining which uses seaweed, so that is coming soon enough. That will be useful. It is still not as inexpensive or as affordable as plastic is, but I think we'll get there. Similarly, there are other solutions, mushrooms being used for packaging, agri-waste, hemp, and many other such material which are coming up. I think it will be a combination of many of these which will create opportunities for both corporates and consumers to change their habits.
Truly, Pawan, we will come to that point a little later. You touched upon India, and is it only us, or is everywhere who's probably it is our culture not to be sustainable, or only India is to be playing, or is everybody, all the countries are contributing equally, or people from a particular country, let's say Western country or Eastern countries, are much aware and far ahead than India?
Santosh, last couple of centuries, the world has followed Western ways, right? So the Western ways has been about capitalism, consumption. The science has come from the Western world. Concept of democracy also has come from there, right? So there are lots of things which are good and lots of things which are not so good. But as a society, we have followed, and it's not just India, all over Asia it's the same, right? Thailand is same, Malaysia is same, China has also learned from Western world. So I think at this point of time, it is not a question of blaming somebody, but I think it's a question of can we change now? right? So, uh, as we spoke in the beginning of this podcast, right? So, reducing consumption, not having much consumption, was the way of life in India, and probably the reason for that was that there was no access to good products, right? Um, we had very much lesser production than our requirements, and hence we had to reuse things. I remember cars used to be repaired. I used to take cars to a mechanic. They could repair parts. Now there is no concept of that. It is replacement. Now it's not that I have changed in 20 years that I love new parts to be put in the car, but it's just the way of life, right? It's available. It's easy. It's convenient. It's why bother? So it's that kind of a thing. And this we have got because of a certain way of how the economies work. And I think more and more people have to talk about it. It has to be a dining table conversation. And as consumers, we have to ask questions to ourselves, and sometimes ask our kids, do you really need what you're buying? And if the answer is actually I don't need it, then why buy, right? So, and it's not about saving money, as we know, right? It's about, it's a waste. I do that all the time personally, but I'm not an activist, so I don't go around telling people to do the same. But I think we should all think very hard about the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle.
I agree. Varun, I was reading somewhere or listening to somebody who said the cars, the motor vehicles running on fossil fuels are but emitting less carbon than the EVs which we are propagating now. What do you think?
Sure. So just before I come there, just want to make a quick comment or a thought rather. See, if we take example of plastics, I think because that touches everyone on this planet, during ownership, whether it is India or some other countries. See, I think it is clear from a solution point of view, the government ensures or provides a legislation. Let's take an example of plastic packets, right, or plastic bags, right? So in most parts of our country today, the micro of what the plastic bags are mandated by the government so that they ensure that they are recycled. But an equally important part of that is we as consumers, as people, we throw the plastic in different places. But the thing to ask is, do we have enough number of dustbins? And do we also have that awareness? How often do we see someone in a car, throw out a plastic packet or, piece of, could be a wafer packet, so on and so forth. So I think it's a combination of different things. That's what the challenge is high. And this is something that there is no easy way out, but it is a combination of government legislation, it is a combination of consumer awareness, but it's also about providing the facility. If I don't see a dustbin for a couple of kilometers, how am I going to dispose of something that I'm used, right? Which is on the go, where there's a soft drink or a pack of chips. So I think there are too many aspects of this that need to come together. And maybe the last part on this is, if you look at a country like China, we think our population is very large. Let's compare an equally populous country. Having lived there, the kind of facilities, the kind of use of technology, etc., that is there is tremendous. So they are managing it. If you look at Beijing's AQI, the air quality standard, which 5 years back was abysmal, today it is, I think, 50% of all vehicles in China are EVs. So I'm coming back to your question. And you have an AQI which is significantly improved in Shanghai and Beijing, the other cities, right? So coming back to this part and to your question is, it is a combination of factors, but it all starts with each one of us being have to do this. We have to, like, Pawan rightly said, we got to implement 3 R's in everything that we do. Reducing consumption, I'm sorry, Pawan, I probably have a different view. I think that's very, very personal and probably very difficult to do, right? Because consumption is a factor of an economic or economic growth, because that is how the entire upliftment happens. But coming back to, I'm sorry I digressed. It was a TV question. So when you look at the cradle to grave, because that's the way you look at any battery or energy system, the lithium ion even today would have a 50% total carbon emission versus the next best alternative, which is next. So it is 100%, not a percentage terms, but 100% more environmentally friendly than lead acid. These are, there is no comparison because there are huge emissions. The second part, and I'm just preempting Santosh, is the recycled gift. So when you look at lithium ion today, which I'm saying lithium ion because it's a dominant chemistry which goes into our phones, into our vehicles, etc. 90% of rare earth metals are recyclable for the technologies that will be able to be. And that is going to be a significant part of even an environment reduction, because as you recycle more, you're able to ensure that you mine less of the rare earth minerals that are used in EVs. So,
Absolutely. We hear a lot of companies declaring themselves as a carbon neutral. In fact, I think the Kochi airport is a carbon neutral airport. What about your organization? Do you have some plan to get there? And what is the timeline? And what is the general kind of talk or awareness that companies are moving towards that, or it's just that they're creating for some legislation to come in and they can start working on that?
So just to share you the properly now the right term. So people use these different terms of carbon neutral, etc. You're absolutely right. The right term is net zero, because carbon neutrality occurs at 3 scope emissions. So scope 1 emission, which comes from your owned asset, let's say your vehicle. Scope 2 emission is a source of power. And scope 3 is a value chain stroke rented assets. So their entire supply chain forms part of your scope 3 emissions, because you don't have control of that. Now, for example, this payment, you don't manufacture, there's some comes from someone else. So when you talk about neutrality, it's scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. As per the Paris Agreement which you alluded to, countries had signed up to a 2050 net zero target. That was 196 countries. India took over, I think, a realistic target of 2070, as 2050 is next to impossible. Just to give you a sense of some of the organizations in India, Reliance, and we all know how audacious Reliance is, they've taken a net zero target of 2035. Let's keep in mind that they operate the largest petrochemical complex on this planet in China, but not Reliance to find a way and do it. Most organizations, whether it's Unilever, a Nestle, a PH, etc., within this country, have net zero targets in 2040 and 2050. So that's where the net zero part is coming in. Again, coming back to the point of carbon neutrality for current organization or organization point of view, most organizations today have something where they operate under an ESG framework, which is environmental, social, and governance. And a net zero forms part of your the environmental part. And you do have different frameworks. From an overall industry point of view, right? If you look at carbon emission as a whole, what are the big chunks? So you've got the food space, you've got the mobility and transportation, you've got energy systems, you've got construction, you've got cement, iron, and steel. In fact, I'm sure you'll probably be aware, there is a European legislation called CBAM, which is from mid of 2026. If the steel is not of a certain grade from an emission point of view, I think they're calling it green steel, that steel A will not be allowed into the EU, and if it will be, which is going to be very selective, there'll be huge tariffs that will be levied on it, which will basically make it not competitive. So I think this is a very real thing, right? This is not about, that, we can wait for this to happen here, etc. In fact, even coming back to the government, from a government point of view, you've got the carbon trading mechanism. So the carbon trading should start off formally in India again in 2026, which basically needs, Santosh, if you're an organization whose carbon surplus basis your initiatives exactly you're taking, let's say carbon deficit, I'll have to buy that carbon for you at a certain price, becomes a commodity exchange. So you can actually trade your surplus carbon on a carbon commodity exchange and earn money out of it rather than just talk about it this year and tweet from a greed or what.
Can you please explain a bit more about being carbon surplus and how exactly it works? I don't understand basics, so please keep that in mind.
I'm going to try, and then I know this too well. But to me, let's say, so let's take a step. When we talk about net zero, we're saying we take as a nation, etc. You take your pre-industrial emissions, and you say that this is how much it will reduce over a period of time. As an organization, I do the same. I look at my 2090, 20, or a certain baseline to say versus this is how I'm going to reduce. Right now, we just talk about that. But Santosh, this also extends to water usage, how I'm recycling water or reducing water. It also is about your source of power. So you take 2019, 18, or 20 as your baseline and then lay out that over a period of time, this is how I'm going to attack on Scope 1 emissions, Scope 2 emissions, Scope 3 emissions. And these are the initiatives I'm going to take. So let's take a practical example. Scope 1 emissions. Today, why are organizations moving their fleets, whether it's trucks or buses, they're moving them to either EVs, that's happening more on buses, on trucks, the damage is still there, so they're moving to LNG, and of course, combination of biofuels, which is better, but we still don't have an economic solution from a truck point of view with EVs yet. But that is, I think, a matter of touch. So, by moving my fleet, my poor fleet to EVs, I'm reducing my carbon. And this is something that you started recording in something called a PRSAR, which is a sustainable reporting format, which is the DEVA, I say. So you got a clear, I would say, a regulatory oversight or regulatory mechanism that's put in place. So you start measuring the carbon reduction, Scope 1, Scope 2, like energy and source of power, and that's why you're going to have warehouses, Santosh, which currently operate on solar power. There's a lot of factories today have the entire top covered with solar panels, and Scope 3 of houses are extended managing. So you start measuring the reduction in each of these. And if I say that I am now, like you mentioned in the example of the Cochin Airport, which is true, the carbon neutral, let's say that they've got excess carbon because they have to reduce X, but because they have certain initiatives and they can't beyond the ask your excess carbon surplus, which you declare. So this is something which is not just theoretical, it is good to start happening very soon.
Pawan, any thought on this?
I think Varun has given really good description of how it works, and I think with everybody having a goal of net zero, it doesn't really mean that they all will be on their own net zero. Some of them will have to buy carbon for carbon credits for the carbon they'll emit. For example, we are all getting into AI, so more data centers, right? More digitization, more energy requirement. So you can't expect all the behemoths like Microsoft and Google to be actually net zero through their operations. So they will have to buy carbon credits to get to net zero, and which is already happening. Great thing is that there is a carbon credit called that is generated out of biochar, and India is a big producer of agriculture. So we and agri waste. So we can actually produce a lot of biochar from agri waste, which creates carbon credits of very high and good value. And hence new technologies are being built again over there for startups, and startups should really think of that area because that requires software, that requires blockchain, that requires technology for conversion of agriculture to biochar and other things to get that very expensive carbon credit, which eventually some of these big guys will buy off him.
Also, on the similar issue, is there any incentive by government? Of course, certain organizations are kind of well aware and they want to be carbon neutral, environment friendly, and they love planet Earth and everything. But is there a push from government in terms of incentive, which kind of is a driving code? Is there something?
So in last year's budget, the Honorable Finance Minister for the first time allocated 35,000 crores for net zero. So it was the first time that these terms were used and money was allocated. Second, when you look at two-wheeler EV incentives, it forms part of FAME, which is the adoption of electric vehicles. So there is clearly a financial incentive. Let's also be highly aware that energy sources are also incentivized. So solar power and installation of solar panels for agriculturists and others is incentivized more for agriculturists. But that is at a state level because it's a state subject. So that is also there. So you're absolutely right, Santosh. The government is not just pontificating about this ki aap karo, industry should do or you should do. They're putting money where your mouth is. And for the first time, after COP27, which is the Association of Countries on Net Zero, the Honorable Environmental Minister presented a roadmap with very clear milestones leading up to how we will go to net zero from a 2070 point of view. So the government, I think, is doing a sterling job. Of course, we all would want them to do more, but I think they do a great job.
Good to hear that. Now coming to Asia, which is of your expertise. Now, government, Varun said government is doing probably good enough. Are there any startups and what kind of startups are there in the industry? And you have been there for a very long time, working with these startups, investing in those startups, and probably interacting and mentoring those startups. Are we creating, developing, innovating products which are sustainable, and for the industry which is like shifting from these plastics and other things to sustainable products?
Are you talking from the perspective of government giving initiatives to that?
So I'm talking about are there organizations who are working towards it, leaving aside these EV companies, which are the other startups?
Yeah. Actually, everything tends to tie up with the policies, both strict as well as incentive policies by the government, and that has created huge opportunities for startups in various areas. Mobility is one of them, which we just spoke about. There is a lot in the renewable space. It makes a lot of economic sense for India to be energy secure. We need much more energy that we are producing today. So renewables is the way to go, and government has created policies for that. And startups are building a lot of different technologies, services, and other paraphernalia kind of industrial products in that space. Similarly, a lot about agriculture, because agriculture is more from two sides. One is that we need more resilience in our agricultural practices because the climate is changing. So there is a lot of initiative being taken by startups as well as some of the other government bodies, incubators, etc., for creating better practices, technology for better agriculture as well as management of agricultural waste. So that has created an enormous requirement for something like biogas or natural gas, also for use of agri-waste for energy or for different kind of material like packaging, etc., etc. There is also, when we come to this whole concept of recycling, when I said that plastic needs to be recycled, that has also created a lot of opportunity for startups to come up with technologies to recycle better, more efficiently. So in every sphere, every space, I think for economic reasons and for also because of government policies, there is work happening. So this is one side of it. Second side of it is the support of the government in terms of innovation or the intention of startup founders to come up with something innovative. I think India has reached that threshold of number of startups being successful that there is now money coming in for deep tech as well, both from the government as private investors. There are a couple of them which have already made name. There is a company called Agnikul, you might have heard of it, right? It's not exactly in the sustainability space, but it is 3D printed cryogenic engines for rockets, which sort of allows cheaper way of making rockets and reusing them. So some kind of sustainability, but that's all deep tech, right? So there is a lot more emphasis happening. Government has got a lot of policies, promotional schemes, grants. There are a lot of competitions which happen. SIDBI takes part in that, METI, STPI, and many other organizations. There are over 1,000 incubators in India with various engineering colleges and also MBA colleges, which are promoting, which are helping startups get these grants, get the early money, even CSR funds. Corporates are giving grants for that matter. Corporates have created impact funds, which are creating accelerators or accelerating the startups innovations much faster. And at the same time, I think the founders are now like, okay, ho gaya e-commerce, yaar. So let's build something more from India. So there is that much more passion now in the younger generation that they want to create a mark as Indians on the startup world with new technologies. So I think from all perspectives, the ecosystem is built up very well, and it will continue to grow because none of this is happening for emotional reasons. A lot of it is for economic reasons and for a better future. So I think, I'm pretty optimistic. You must have got that already.
Absolutely. And in fact, I'm pretty sure there are enough startups as what made you set up this fund. So coming back to your fund, why did you set up this particular fund, focusing on this industry only? And how many other funds are there, like ZECA, which are focusing purely on this sustainable industry?
Yeah. So sustainability, as I was telling you earlier, sustainability is an opportunity. Right? It's not just about doing good for the environment. It's actually something which is a great opportunities for startups to come in. But think about it, when will be your opportunity to build a new vehicle, right? I mean, as a startup founder, you can hardly only dream of doing that, but now you can, right? So people are building two-wheelers, four-wheelers. We already have startups which have done an IPO with two-wheelers. That opportunity never existed before, right? So it's an opportunity. And that's how we see it. If everything has to change, if new solutions have to be given, new tools have to be brought in, startups definitely have an opportunity there. A lot of that will be done by the incumbents because it requires huge infrastructure. But a lot of it is softwares, technologies, services, consumer products, which will be solved by startups. Having that in mind, I decided to get into this space. And also what encouraged me was that there are very few people looking at it when I started. Because sustainability, frankly speaking, is just about 2 years old subject, right? As far as investments or startup world is concerned. Nobody's really spoke about it that much before that. So there were very few VCs 2 years back which were looking at this space. There were a couple of them which were forming to invest at Series A or Series B space. But at the early stage, there were a handful. Maybe Rainmatter was looking at it, and a couple of others were specifically in a focused way looking at this space, which meant that there is no clutter, which meant there is space for me to create my own brand, my own name.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, Varun, there, if you look at top 5 industries who are you the majority of carbon payer in India, and the energy sector is on top, followed by transport, industry, and agriculture, etc., etc. Now, if you put together these top 4, 5, what are those opportunities or these young entrepreneurs and startups to kind of step up and help our planet and industry and all of us, and seize that opportunity? So, if you want, give a couple of examples there.
So I think the biggest source of carbon emissions is actually supply chain. 60% of all carbon emissions come through the supply chain. Now, with its supply chain, I think, Santosh, probably if you focus just on the energy and battery systems, because that impacts both at a commercial level as well as a residential level. So currently we're talking about lithium ion, but please bear in mind sodium ion, which basically salt, is already a commercially viable product. So that battery chemistry is going to be potential will revolutionize the industry. Because currently, as we all know, lithium mining, firstly, the sources are different. It's called ADC, Argentina, Bolivia, Chile. They have most of the lithium ion reserves, which China has authorized. Every reserve they be equipped to the game. Once you move that from lithium to sodium, you're significantly reducing the carbon impact of the battery manufacturing. You're decarbonizing the entire supply chain because sodium. Third is you're clearly giving an alternate source of energy. So a lot of good work by startups, by new technology companies is happening in sodium ion. In fact, there's a company called Faraday Energy, which is UK based. I think it's formed primarily by people of Indian origin who are doing some excellent work on sodium ion. There were actually 8 types of lithium ion chemistries, all with different, I would say, pros and cons from a cost, safety, type of usage point of view. Let's say your passenger vehicle, you need higher range, but in a residential use, you don't need that. You can keep on charging your battery, so on and so forth. Then you want hydrogen fuel cells, but that's still a further way. So the point is, I think just on back systems, there is significant amount of work being done. There's another battery system called solid-state batteries, which do not use lithium ion. So I think this is where the maximum amount of innovation that is, I think, happening and will happen in the next decade or so, because it is at the end of the day your power source which is going to play a critical role, be it in terms of your residential or your non-commercial environments or your commercial economies from a factory or a transportation point.
So you're talking about use and consumption of these ion batteries and sodium batteries, etc. How much of these batteries and resources we are producing here in India versus how much we are importing from?
Great question, Santosh. 90% of lithium ion across the world comes from a simple country, just China. Yeah. In fact, and they've been, I think it's important to be credit where it's due. They've developed lithium ion over the last 15-20 years. Just to share with you, the prices of lithium ion batteries are up by 90% over a decade. And this is where the unit economics shift. While our EVs today, gaining a rapid pace, there is an impact as an aspect of cost. Why is a BYD or why is a Tesla makes a lot of its batteries each. So 90% push new comes from China. And this is where I think, not just for a country like ours, for various countries developing alternative technologies, be it a sodium ion, etc., can create that supply chain de-risking, which is absolutely fucked.
In fact, I was in a jury panel a few months ago. We were evaluating some startups, and there is a NASCOM incubation center in Bangalore, and we had about 10 plus startup working in this exact same technology, and they were right here in my office and presenting amazing technology. And I was amazed that we are innovating at such a great of course innovation is happening in Bangalore, but at such a fast speed. And the only thing what probably is lacking is the mentorship and the fun, because this is purely new. And considering what Yarun mentioned, majority of the technology and the product is coming from only one country. That means probably we are not ready yet to promote, to encourage, or to kind of trust our products. So just a quick answer, Varun. What do you think? How long will it take for company like here or any other company to start buying product from India manufactured or those companies versus imported from China?
Sure, I think, see, this one needs to look at the entire value chain. And I think first, the government is doing a fantastic job, right? So let's take the example of semiconductors, right? Just the last 24 months, the kind of investments that have gone in with large corporates, including the Tata Group, which is, investing into semiconductors, that is where you realize we are very import dependent. I think similar from a battery automation technology point of view, energy system point of view, I don't think there's any dearth of knowledge. In fact, also to share with you, IIT Madras has a partnership with FedEx. They have started a center for transportation and logistics with a focus on AI and sustainability. So you do have these investments that are going in. I think it's more of these new chemistries, especially with sodium. Again, I can maybe even offer share a lot of detail. But there is some incredibly excellent stuff that is happening in India. It's about getting the right proof of concept, Santosh, which I think is happening as we speak. I think that's, if we can just take the example of maybe a auto major that we're all aware of. You look at what Mahindra has done with its fleet, as in the EVs that they've launched in the last 6 to 9 months are absolutely unbelievable. So clearly an organization of that scale would be I would imagine, would be working on their own indigenous developed battery systems, because that's how they'll be able to scale up much more profitably over a period of time. So I think it's a matter of time. That's already happening. And I think it's just about getting the right unit economics in the quality in place and the proof of concept. But there's no doubt in my mind that this is where the next stage of evolution and innovation pick up. And lastly, I think, Honorable Minister of Commerce, Mr. Piyush Goyal, I think he encouraged the entire startup environment by saying that, guys, we invest more in technology, which helps improve, be it, from an automation point of view, a mobility point of view, or an automobile point of view, rather than looking at other aspects, chief hardware, probably less value add. So I think it's a combination of all of these, which is, I think, very, very, very much going to happen in operations.
Someone's assuring. Pawan, if one young engineer, let's say 20-25 years old, is looking for setting up an entity, startup, in this industry, which are those top 3 areas where you would recommend for these investors to look at it and explore the opportunities? Top 3. I will come to Varun as well.
Very tough question to answer, Santosh, because so first of all, I think it depends on the person's capabilities and education, background, etc. But let's say, I would pick different areas. There is a huge opportunity in mobility. I don't know how much of new technology or new innovation that can be done in the next 5 years, but the opportunity is today. Secondly, there is also big opportunities in the space of renewables. India is a energy deficient country, and we need a lot more energy than what we have. So new technologies for solar, for renewable, for anything else, for setting up foundation for nuclear energy. And also, I think there is a big wave coming of consumer brands. I think the next generation is going to ask a lot more about environment friendly products. So if you are a founder who can build consumer brands, who likes to do that, I think there is a space to be built over here.
Absolutely, the top three. Yeah. Thank you.
If you look at what touches the maximum number of people, but I would repeat that I would say, but clearly I would say FMCG and food is a very important part, because as long as we are around, we're going to keep on using those products. But to bit specifically, I think, Santosh, it's on product development along with packaging, along with first and last mile access to the end consumer. Because if we make this more efficient and more sustainable, I think the benefits are tremendous. Because there are, given a country of 140 crore people, each one of us who needs a FMCG product, just imagine if we were able to make it more sustainable, if we were able to use, more, I would say, market friendly. But the most important thing is that, I'm sure what I'm saying is something that anybody would say. I think the challenge, the opportunity, Santosh, is getting the right unit economics for his parts. The second, I think, is agriculture, because that's where 40% of our country is employed in. So if you're able to, very specifically from a soil point of view, how do we make our soil a lot more sustainable, i.e., not use excessive chemicals and so forth, not use, not appropriate or not long-term oriented genetically modified options. I think these two is probably what I think is tremendous scale and ability to touch each one of us. And this to me is the challenge and the opportunity for all of us.
Right. Yeah. Just to add to that, so Varun, thanks for mentioning FMCG, because I did mention consumer brands. And that's what I meant. In fact, we have invested in a company, in a brand called Clevo, which is actually doing exactly what you were talking about, appealing to the masses with product which is cheaper than what's available today, uses no plastic, and is natural ingredients which are good for the earth as well. So yeah.
Right, that comes to my mind, Santosh, is some brand called Whole Truth, powered from your awareness, right? So they make these nutrition bars about various other things. It's just brilliant the way, he's a kind of Shasha Mehta. Fantastic. I think he's proven to each one of us that doing mass level food products sustainably with the right ingredients is something that can be delivered by overcoming significant challenges. I didn't want to just leave it theoretically. Santosh, there is, again, Pawan mentioned another brand, and this I think is another food product which I think is probably some things to come.
I would also like to briefly touch upon three things: the duties and responsibilities of people, organizations, and the government. And we will limit this discussion to India only. And then look at, to start with, we the people. This is what our constitution says. And look at what we are doing. There are certain duties towards planet, towards everybody, and what we are doing. And if you look at last 5 or 3 years with this quick commerce, and before that e-commerce, and what are we doing? The amount of I don't know whether if I could say these quick commerce and e-commerce and all these food deliveries and everything is making us lazy. We are just sitting at our home and couches and ordering left, right and center. And trust me, it's the story of every household that it's a Saturday evening or Sunday afternoon, if there are 3 members in family, probably they will be ordering food from 2 different restaurants. Now, what is our responsibility towards the society, towards the planet? And when are we going to realize that? A quick thought from Don to start.
You want me to talk about that?
Yes.
Yeah. So, no, Santosh, I think I differ over here. None of this is making us lazy. We are lazy. And that's why they were built. And so, the TV remote was built so we didn't have to get up from the sofa to switch on him or off the TV. All products, right? If you look at how we build products, is to create more convenience and cater to that laziness that human beings naturally have. I don't see anything wrong in ordering food home. I think it is taking away the use of cars to go to restaurants. So it's there are positive and negatives of everything. I think expecting consumers to be socially responsible and feel that if they don't order food, they're being more responsible. Probably, maybe will be wrong also, but probably not even possible. I think what is important, as I keep saying, is that we need to give alternates, right? So what is wrong with delivered food is the packaging. So we should make packaging which is recyclable. Which is not just one-time use or maybe something like that, right? So those kind of things can be done and are being done. You mentioned e-commerce as well. The same thing, right? There are startups which are built packaging which is used from upcycled material, which is not wasteful, takes less space. I think we should not be talking about what has gone wrong. We should be talking about now how to sort it.
Absolutely. And I think Pawan has invested in a couple of those food delivery apps. That's why he's, that question, the correct question.
I will say I am a capitalist and I have invested in media startup. I think the thing is that consumer has a problem. Hence there is a demand and there should be supply, right? So that's the order of things.
I think if I just take a step back, I think it's about awareness and incentivization. What do I mean by that? And it's very, very personal, right? So, I may think that, hey, you know what? I need this right here, right now, and I'm okay to order 3 or 4 nights over QCOM app. Just bear in mind that QCOM didn't exist till 2-3 years back. And my only submission is from an awareness point of view. Is it so important that we need that in 8 or 10 minutes? Cannot not wait for 2 hours? Is it so important? So I think that's just that awareness bit. But that's where, Pawan absolutely, he's absolutely right. It's the job of a manufacturer in a economy or in a capitalistic society to create a differentiator. And that's where they will keep on pushing that aspect. And that's where I think the government, from a legislation point of view, let's bear in mind that when a Q-commerce person, delivery person is delivering within 6 to 8 minutes, please keep in mind his mindset. To a guy, he's probably going to drive this 2-wheeler very, very fast. He's going to not only consume more fuel, but it's also not going to be very safe. Neither for it, neither for pedestrians on the door, right? So I think that awareness aspect, and that's where I personally think probably some sort of legislation may help. Because let's do this for 1 minute.
This is one little pause you, and we are going to take this example as a quick commerce and e-commerce, where 3 parties involved: common people like us who are consumer, and then the organization who are making profit, and then the government who's kind of custodians, right? So we touch upon and discuss all 3 parties. Let's start with the consumers.
It's each one to his own, right? I don't think you can, because what may be convenient for you may be a very different aspect of me. So I think, let's look at it from a manufacturer point of view. Their responsibility is to solve a problem, and sometimes to create a problem where one did exist and make sure that you give a solution. Now, if you think that you need it, either from an awareness point of view or a convenience point of view, you go for it. The second part is incentivization, which is you would see all these kind of deals that are being put on, whether it's on e-commerce or quick commerce, which we all as consumers are exposed to, and that drives behavior. So I don't think there is, from a consumer point of view, I don't think there's anything that we can prescribe. It's a pre-concept. It's for each one to his own. So I think the problem comes to all aspects into organizations are going to do what delivers the maximum revenue and profit maximization, right? It's a different thing like e-commerce, and most e-commerce companies don't make profit. It's a conversation altogether. But that's what they're going to be driven by. And that's where I think there has to be certain oversight by governments, by regulators, just to provide guardrails to ensure that, it doesn't get misutilized. For example, we saw the GST about 2 weeks back, where the gaming industry was dealt with a death blow, right? Say, especially where you are putting money, etc. Now, the fact that the consumer, just to report a comparison, if you allow me, suppose, the fact that consumers did that willingly, you had manufacturers who put all that, whatever you want to put it, advertising, etc., to guide that certain behavior. Now government came and said, hey, what is not permitted, and that's what they took that away. So I think we've got to be very aware that as a manufacturer, my role is making a profit maximization. And I think that's just a role of what a manufacturer would be in any car.
So you're saying unless there is a clear-cut a policy or government-driven policy or framework, we are not going to change. But as consumer or organization,
There's a lot of discussion on what all ingredients you put in food products, right? There's a demonstration which proposes that certain. Yeah, exactly. You would know much better than me. There is strong industry persistence because it at the end of the day hurts.
Yeah, so I have a little contrarian view to that. I think consumers have a responsibility to demand. I don't think that consumers should just say that, hey, I'm here to just consume, I don't care. You care because your next generation is going to suffer, right? I have 5 apartments, I want to buy 3 more, what for, right? So I need to question that I am going to increase cement consumption and take away tree covers in my city so that I can buy 1 more apartment and get rentals out of that, when my son 20 years later is going to tell me that, hey father, where is air to breathe anymore? So I think it is important for consumers to start thinking about it. It is a very important discussion to have on the dinner table now. I am not an activist, again I'm saying, so I'm not going to go around saying this to people, but I think unless consumers demand, the companies are not going to change. Policies are always made that they can be circumvented as well, right? So let's just take it real that if there is a demand, there will be a supply. European consumer has already shown that. Most of European consumer is very aware. They are looking for products which are not doing greenwashing. They are demanding from the fashion brands to get more conscious about environment, and fashion is a very big emitter of methane. And then things like that are happening in Europe. And I'm glad that I am hearing from the next generation that they are conscious about it as well. I think consumer has to demand better from the businesses. If you go around the restaurants today, most of them have started offering water in glass bottles, right? Why is that happening? It's not because of legislation. So it is because the consumer started demanding कि मेरे को plastic bottle नहीं चाहिए, right? So it's those kind of things which have started to happen. The other responsibility of consumer is to throw waste responsibly. I am a diver. I go into the ocean. Every time I dive, I bring back few plastic bottles, plastic packs. Last time I went to a beach in another country, and it's not India, I'm talking about another country. And in one morning, I collected 4 big sacks of plastic from the beach, which was basically coming from the sea. It's not that people were throwing it from the beach, it was just coming from the sea. So we have a responsibility that if we are moving in a vehicle, we shouldn't be throwing waste out on the roads. Like, we don't need legislations for these things. We need to get responsible. So I think consumer has to first of all become responsible and demanding. Only then things will change. From the companies, I think they should already be realizing that if they don't improve their way, their supply chains are getting disrupted. So they have to look for alternates. They have to improve their things. They have to get more efficient. Energy crisis, energy price points are going to keep changing very drastically. And with renewables coming, it will be harder to predict prices. So they'll have to reduce their energy consumption. So once again, this is not about legislation. This is not about policy. This is about bottom line. So I think they will have to, they are already doing it, for that matter. From the government perspective, I think every country which has progressed as an economy, as a leader in the world, has progressed because of science. So science has to be policy, right? It has to be at the policy level. And that's exactly what US did. That's exactly what UK did before that. And that's exactly what China is doing now. It's science which is at the policy level. And when you do that, then you start thinking way ahead. Varun mentioned semiconductors. That's a great step towards the same direction. And I think similarly, more steps have to happen. There is a lot of stress now on defense tech, and that will create more science and more innovation. Hopefully, that will not be, substitution of Chinese product, but something which is better than what is coming from China, so we can be suppliers of the world. So I think these are the things which are needed. It's not, let's not just leave it for somebody else to solve for it.
Absolutely, and I think the general mindset, and I'm sorry to use the term general and generalizing, but the mindset is that unless I'm directly affected, unless otherwise, it bites me directly, I'm not going to change. It's just like somebody, everybody is a dog lover unless your kid is bitten by a dog.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. No, that will remain, right? So we all know smoking is bad for us. We all know that eating too much of fried food is bad for us. We indulge in that. So all I'm saying is that we need to, you talked about the food coming over, or you buying clothing or anything else. We need to start thinking what is better for environment. That's all I'm saying, right? And I think people have started doing that. Some of that is also started happening because of policy. So in India, in Delhi, because of air pollution, there is always this gap measures just keep coming, and then you can't use certain vehicles and whatever. So the rich people have started buying electric BMWs. So it is helping. But I think, it's the conversation we need to have. That's what I meant.
Perfect. So last closing remark by both of you, and when you made that is so as I mentioned earlier, there are 3 stakeholders. What is that one change you want to see from all 3? That includes consumer, organization, and the government at the policy level. So last closing remarks, mentioning what is that one change you want to see from all 3. Who wants to go first?
So I think, honestly, I believe the government is doing a fair bit. Sure, we can expect them to do more, but I think they're absolutely going on the right path. I would just say increase in momentum. I think that's what I would request of the government. I think from a manufacturing and consumer, and this is where the tricky part comes, right? So yes, the consumer will get more demanding, but then will the consumer be willing to pay that price premium at a mass level? So I think that's really important to keep in mind. Even today, just from a fact point of view, there is no organic or sustainable FMCG product at scale yet in India. If that was the case, that consumers are so vocal, that probably that shouldn't be the case. But I always see the glasses half, not half empty, but half, half full. Contrary, I'm saying if you are underpaid out, I am an optimist in this case, which is consumers, yes, as awareness goes up, that amount of clarity in terms of what the consumers will demand would increase. But I think it's about getting the unit economics right. It's happened in the EV space because of the unit economics. And this is something that where technology and science will play a critical role from a manufacturing point of view. And I think the biggest change by submission would be from manufacturers' point of view. I think they have the resources, they have the ability to think long term, they definitely have the I would say the intellectual horsepower to do that. So why think incrementally in terms of innovations? For example, can I make a shampoo or a soap which is significantly sustainably friendly? And yes, to Pawan's earlier point, give more choices to the consumers. But then drive that incentivization to consumers for more adoptions. So in summary, to me, it's the manufacturer who needs to probably play the most important role and probably has the biggest gap to drive types of opportunity to drive the whole system.
I totally agree with Varun on that. I think, and I am a investor in startups. So I, instead of, pointing fingers at government or the consumer, I think I have to start pointing fingers at myself and what am I doing to change that. As Varun rightly said, I think consumers are not going to pay premium, but there are already a lot of solutions which are at par or even cheaper than current solutions. The Indian corporate has to come forward and start looking at those innovations seriously. Start investing in them, even though it is coming out from their own research and development budgets. They can actually give opportunities to startups, innovate faster and better, give them access to their place of work so they can do pilots and POCs, provide them with some capital and not just hope that the government will keep on giving grants. They come forward, they will innovate and invent products which will be better for their own business, better for environment, and they could actually be world beaters as well. Same thing about startups, and I've said that before, that startups have to start thinking about solutions for the world, not just for India. I think there is enough problems of the global south which India has, and India is in the best place to solve for that world. The Western world is not going to solve for it. So it's the choice we have, it's the chance we have, it's the responsibility we have as startup founders to innovate products, services, technologies which can solve for these problems. And it should not be import substitution. It should be really solving the problem for the world. That's the motive. Yeah, these are the two things I would like to see both in the corporates and startup. Things I would like to see both in the corporates this time.
Why I get a message for organization that get better or get beaten. So I think we need to have more conversations like this, and it is important for all the stakeholders that the awareness is made and the right steps are taken, and that would start only when we start talking, right? So thank you so much, Pawan, for joining us and discussing such an important topic, and thank you, Varun, with such an insightful conversation, and you led this, and in fact we are having this conversation only because of you. So thank you so much for making this happen.
Thank you, Varun. Thank you, Santosh. This was such a nice thing to do. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Take care.